kind of the story of my life. I thought I'd sneak out for a quick restroom break, and it was my speaking time. Kind of reminds me of when, I think, for those of you that I'm meeting for the first time today, when we were expecting our first baby, and I found out I'm going to be a dad, and I said, I'm a speaker, I'm going to write out my script, and the first words when I hold the baby in my arms for 9 months, that's going to be my kind of thing. So I practiced that in front of the mirror, and I had it all pretty, everything was perfect. And finally that moment came, and I was in Chicago, and Good Samaritan Hospital, Dr. Arora, the gynecologist, my wife was going through C-sections, a lot of confusion, things happening very quickly. And finally, the baby comes out, it's a baby boy, and Dr. Arora says, you can hold him, Ali. So I said, okay. So I hold him, I look in his eyes, and I just totally blanked out. I couldn't for the life of me remember a single word. And the only words that came out were, Arshian, I'm your papa, and I'm an expert on HIPAA. He started crying. It's like, put me back in there. I think I've got the wrong dad. But I think this actually worked out well, because the Mark and the other speaker went through. This was first published, I think it was Computer World, one of the magazines, the 42 areas that Piedmont was questioned. And like I think John has said and others have said, there's not been much information that has come out since March, when I believe February, March, when this happened, up until now. And in the reference I'd shared with you earlier about the Wall Street Journal's publication from yesterday, they indicated that just in this year alone, 270 organizations have had some serious type of identity theft breaches that have taken place. And for me as a security professional, what that implies is that at least 270 organizations that we know of have had their security defenses penetrated. So that's something to keep in mind. I've only got a couple of slides to summarize some of the Piedmont-related information that Health and Human Services, CMS, was asking for. And I kind of looked at those very closely to kind of understand what is it, if I were an auditor on the CMS side, what is it that I'd be looking for, and see how I could group it and all of that. And I kind of broke it down into two categories. One, the capabilities. They were looking for what type of capabilities exist to collect information, because if those capabilities don't exist, then you just can't produce that information regardless of the intent. So on the capability side, there are many bullets here. Has the organization conducted risk assessments, analysis? What about violations? Does a sanction policy exist? Many organizations have not actually updated the sanctions policy, which was originally developed by Human Resources and maybe updated at the time of the HIPAA privacy rule to meet the requirements of HIPAA security. And it is number three in terms of implementation specifications in the HIPAA security rule. The ability to record and examine activity in information systems. This is lacking. It's seriously lacking across organizations. Just this year in 2007, I've been to over 100 healthcare organizations consulting on HIPAA and security and all of that. And I see two things. One, they don't have the capabilities, and the very few that do don't have the necessary skill sets or the time to look at all of that information. So that's definitely a challenge. The ability to prevent, detect, contain security violations. A lot of organizations are not even aware that their infrastructure has actually been compromised. And so, like John mentioned earlier at the start of this session, the ability to have intrusion prevention systems, intrusion detection systems is vital. I think healthcare organizations in general, if I were to look at the state of healthcare information system in America in 2007, reasonably good, not very good, but reasonably good with firewall systems, the first line of defense, but relatively very poor. I'd give it a grade of F with intrusion prevention, intrusion detection. And to not have those technology capabilities, it's like a blind man driving in a dark tunnel with no headlights. You're destined for disaster. So those are, kind of some of the things that are being asked by CMS. I think they're very logical questions that they've asked. And that should be a checklist, if you will, for your organization to kind of go back and see, talk to your information security officer, or if you are the information security officer, budgets and priorities are always a challenge, but to tie that into that this is a part of the Piedmont CMS audit, and I think that sometimes changes the priority of things inside organizations. The other area that Piedmont can teach us is documentation. So like the previous speakers mentioned, a lot of documentation. I think on one point where I would disagree with the previous speakers, it's not a lot of paper, because I think these days you want to do everything electronically to be more efficient. So put it up on your intranet, and I think these policies don't exist just to carry weight. These policies need to translate into communication that's delivered to all employees, all members of the workforce. So very, very important to update these on the intranet to make it visible across. Policies should be visible across the organization, and employees should sign off. Just like they sign off on confidentiality, they should sign off that they have been through training, they understand that these are the security policies, and they know where and how to get it. So a lot of information related to documentation. Most of it could be consolidated in one of two things. And I'm beginning to see, especially in the last quarter of 2007, we are beginning to see organizations do two things. One is put all of the general information that can be widely disseminated in the intranet. And the second place, they are looking for controlling access, role-based access to information that still needs to be electronic, to put it in a SharePoint type of a area where authorized individuals can gain access to that information. So very important, this is a checklist of the items that came out from the Piedmont experience. I think it'd be good to kind of go through that in your own environment. The very last bullet, I put that in bold, and I'm not sure if that's noticeable, is the one place where organizations all across America struggle with, especially in healthcare, is patch management. We cannot keep up with patches at the operating systems, at the applications, the communication devices, and these patches are actually slowly but surely becoming the entry points into the network infrastructure. And my experience with vendors has been a little different from the previous speaker. I think there was a question that a gentleman had asked about vendors, McKesson, and it's not just McKesson, but several of the leading vendors still don't get it with respect to HIPAA compliance. I'm surprised that they don't give capabilities in their products even now, December 12th, 2007, to give us the control that we need to decide how to implement capabilities for password controls, for audit capabilities that would meet the requirements of our policy. So my recommendation very strongly is to, at the time you negotiate, because that's the only time you have any degree of influence over these vendors, is to drive that point very hard, because when they hear from us, that's when you're going to see product shifts. But even today, leading vendors in the industry, to the ones that at least I've worked with, are just not meeting the basic requirements that we all need to be in compliance with HIPAA. So very, very important to press that point hard. Generally in the industry, in the healthcare industry, to kind of take a step away from not just the Piedmont hospital, but kind of what's happening in America with healthcare information, the regulations and all of that, the level of attacks are rising steadily. And the three most attacked industries are the financial industry, government organizations, and healthcare. Healthcare is so rich in identifiable information that I'd expect in 2008, 2009 for the attacks to get more sophisticated and more relentless on the healthcare industry. The place that the hackers are focusing on is three particular areas. Number one is the perimeter defense. The perimeter defense, like I mentioned, is reasonably good with firewall systems, but reasonably poor with the ability to detect attacks that are taking place. So we need to pay a closer attention to that perimeter. Client-side attacks. So a mid-size hospital, 400 beds, for example, may have, let's say, 150 servers or whatever, and hundreds of servers, let's just say, and thousands of end systems. Well, those thousands